You know, when you think about the great mysteries of our time, there are a few that really stick with you. And the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, well, that's right at the top of the list. After all these years, after all the searching and all the analysis, we're still wrestling with one single haunting question.
I mean, really think about that for a second. How does a massive modern Boeing 777, one of the safest and most advanced jets ever built, just vanish, clean off the face of the earth? It's the kind of thing that just isn't supposed to happen. So today, we're going to dive deep into what we know, what we think we know, and why this story still matters so much.
All right, so let's set the scene. The date is March 8th, 2014. We're in Kuala Lumpur, and Flight 370 is getting ready for a pretty standard overnight trip to Beijing. You've got 239 people on board, passengers and crew, all settling in. And by every single account, it was just a totally, completely normal flight.
And this is where things go from normal to, well, to silent. And it happens fast. The flight takes off just after midnight. At 1:19 in the morning, the cockpit makes its last radio call. Just 2 minutes later, the transponder, the device that's constantly broadcasting the plane's identity, goes dark. But it's not totally gone yet. For another hour, military radar tracks an unidentified blip, until 2:22 a.m., when it too just vanishes.
And what were those final words from the cockpit? Good night, Malaysian 370. So simple, so routine. It's the kind of standard sign-off pilots make thousands of times. There was absolutely no hint of trouble, no distress in the voice, nothing to suggest that this was the last time anyone would ever hear from them. It's just chillingly normal.
So instead of continuing on its path to Beijing, the aircraft does something completely unexpected. It makes a sharp, deliberate turn, heading back west across Malaysia. And it's doing this completely dark. No radio calls, no transponder signal. For a short time, it was basically a ghost on that military radar screen before it flew out of range and disappeared for good. For weeks, everyone was searching in the wrong place. Then, investigators got a massive breakthrough. It turns out, even with all its main communication systems turned off, a satellite unit on the plane was still sending out these automatic hourly pings to a satellite in orbit. It's kind of like your phone checking for a signal. Now, these pings didn't give a precise location, but they proved the plane was still powered up and flying for at least 6 more hours. And that completely changed the game, redirecting the entire search to a huge arc of ocean deep in the southern Indian Ocean. So, with that one critical piece of data, the entire investigation was turned on its head, and what came next would become the largest, most complex, and most expensive aviation search in the history of the world. And in the middle of all this technical stuff, the pings, the radar, the search grids, we can never forget the human cost. 239 people from 14 different countries, all of them lost. Their families were just left in this agonizing limbo, absolutely desperate for answers. And the challenge of finding those answers was just staggering. The initial underwater search covered 120,000 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's a massive patch of some of the deepest, most remote, and most rugged ocean floor on the planet. People have said we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about what's down there. That's what they were up against. And as you can imagine, an operation of that size comes with a historic price tag. The initial search cost somewhere around $155 million. That made it, by far, the most expensive search in aviation history. All of that technology, all of that manpower, all poured into finding that plane.
And it was a truly international effort. Malaysia, as the home of the airline, covered the largest portion of the cost. Australia, which was coordinating that massive ocean search, contributed the second most. And China, which had the largest number of its citizens on board, was third.
Now here's the heartbreaking part. Despite that enormous search effort, the main wreckage has never been found. But we do have physical proof. Starting in 2015, pieces of the plane began washing ashore thousands of miles away on the coasts of Africa. A flaperon, that's a part of the wing, was the first piece they found. And that was it. That was the gut-wrenching confirmation that Flight 370 had in fact crashed into the sea. When you have a mystery this huge with so little concrete evidence, a vacuum is created. And that vacuum gets filled with theories. But investigators have really focused on 2 primary scenarios, even though the official report doesn't reach a final conclusion.
And these two leading possibilities could not be more different. The first is deliberate action, the idea that one of the pilots did this on purpose. The second is the so-called ghost flight theory, the idea that some kind of emergency, like a slow decompression, knocked everyone unconscious, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until it simply ran out of fuel. So let's look at the deliberate action theory, because the evidence is compelling. The plane's communication systems weren't just failing, they were manually shut down in sequence. That sharp turn it made, that doesn't look like a system malfunction. And maybe the most chilling piece of evidence of all, investigators found a deleted flight path on the captain's home flight simulator, a path that was eerily similar to the one they believed the plane actually flew. But then you have the hypoxia theory, which the Australian search team initially favored. And this one has points in its favor too. It would explain the complete and utter silence from the plane. No distress calls, no final messages. If there was a slow loss of cabin pressure, everyone on board could have passed out from lack of oxygen. The plane would then just keep flying on its last programmed course for hours, which fits perfectly with that satellite data. So this mystery, it continues to fascinate us, right? But beyond the human tragedy and all the competing theories, the legacy of MH370 is really about how it forced the entire aviation industry to take a hard look at itself. What this incident really laid bare was a shocking truth. Here we are in the 21st century, and a massive commercial airliner could still just disappear over the ocean. It exposed this huge blind spot in how we track planes globally, and it was a wake-up call that the industry had to address immediately. And that led to direct, concrete changes. Because of MH370, there are now new standards for how often planes have to report their position over the ocean. The underwater locator beacons on the black boxes now have batteries that last way longer. The recorders themselves were improved. All of it was done with one single goal in mind: to make sure a plane can never just vanish like this ever again. And yet, for all those changes, the central question of why this happened is still out there. This quote from Tony Abbott, who was Australia's prime minister at the time, is pretty powerful. He says that from the very beginning, the highest levels of the Malaysian government believed it was a murder-suicide by the pilot. It's just a stark reminder of the dark possibilities that still hang over this entire case. So, this is where we're left. We have a few confirmed pieces of debris. We have satellite data, we have a whole new set of safety rules, but the main wreckage, the flight recorders, and the 239 people who were on that plane are still lost to the sea. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. Without finding the plane, will the world's greatest aviation mystery ever truly be solved?